Okay, Rabbi, say Chavtes Amud Aleph at the Mishnah. Hamevi get be'eretz Yisrael v'chala Raizel mishalcho biyad acher. If a person is the shaliach on a get, and he's transporting it from one town in Eretz Yisrael to another. So what do we know? When you're transporting a get locally in Eretz Yisrael, what do you not have to do? What do you not have to do?
You don't have to make the statement.
You don't have to make the statement of b'fanai nechtav or b'fanai nechtam. And therefore, this leads to the Mishnah's psak that if the shaliach, for any reason, becomes ill and is therefore not able to complete his shlichus, he can simply give the get to another person, and it's no problem, because a person who is acting as the shaliach on a get has the same power, has the same sort of authority as the husband himself. He's like the yad of the husband. So just like the husband can appoint a shaliach, the shaliach can appoint another shaliach. Now, why does this not work if you're in Chutz La'aretz? Because the second shaliach cannot say b'fanai nechtav or b'fanai nechtam. Okay? Now, v'im amar lo tul li heimena chayfetz ploni lo yishalchenu biyad acher she'ein ritzano sheyehi piktono biyad acher. But then the Mishnah tells us it depends. If the husband, when he speaks to the shaliach, says, listen, my friend, when you deliver the get, make sure you get that thing that I want back from my wife, my favorite autographed baseball from the 1987 World Series or whatever it is, He says, make sure my wife gives that back to you, right? So he says, in that situation, he's telling this shaliach that I want you specifically to bring back that chayfetz, that object, and therefore you as the shaliach cannot, even if you're sick, you're not allowed to specify someone else, because the husband's instructions are quite explicit that he wants you to bring it back. Okay, now let's take a look at the Gemara. Amar Rav Kahana, Chalatnan. Rav Kahana says, our Mishnah is talking about a case where the shaliach got sick. Now, what Rav Kahana is really saying is that it's only if the shaliach gets sick. If he's not sick, and he just wants to, he's just tired of doing someone else's, he's just tired of being an errand boy, he doesn't have the right to give it off to someone else. It's only like in a shas adechak, like he's sick. So pshita, chalakatani. So the Gemara says, isn't that obvious? I mean, that's what the Mishnah says. It's only if he got sick. Gemara says, no. Mahu detei mahu adin afal gav delo chala v'ayte katani chala urcha demilsa katani kamash malan. No, you might have thought that the Mishnah is only speaking in a common situation, but perhaps in any situation where the shaliach just doesn't want to do it anymore, he can pass it off. That's what Rav Kahana is telling you. It's dafka when he's not able to physically anymore. So the Gemara now says, Heichi dami. Now let's illustrate this, because the Gemara is about to bring a brisa that doesn't seem to take into consideration illness. Ida amar le holech afal gav delo chalanami. V'ida amar le at holech afilu chalanami lo. So as we're going to see from the brisa in a moment, which doesn't make any criteria at all about illness, if the husband says to the shaliach, take the get, then it shouldn't make a difference whether he's sick or not. It should be fine. And if the husband says, you take the get, then the husband's instructions are quite explicit that he dafka wants this shaliach, so then it shouldn't make a difference whether he's sick or not. He shouldn't be allowed to pass it on to someone else. The Irab and Shimon ben Gamliel, afilu chala namilo, and according to Shimon ben Gamliel, in all situations, the shaliach is not allowed to pass it on to somebody else, even if he gets sick, as we'll see in just a minute. The Tanya, here's the brisa. Holech getze li ishti, hareze mishalcho biyad acher. At holech getze li ishti, hareze lo yishalchenu biyad acher. So the Tanakama says that you look at the husband's language. If he says, take this get to my wife, so then he's not specifying that it has to be you as the shaliach who does it, and therefore the shaliach could always appoint a second shaliach. But if the husband says, you take the get to my wife, so then he's emphasizing the you, and therefore he doesn't have a right, the shaliach, to pass it on to someone else. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel oimer ben kachu ben kach eina shaliach osa shaliach. And Shimon ben Gamliel says, no, the shaliach is never allowed to appoint a second shaliach. Now you see from here, this brisa makes no distinction whether the person is ill or not, which leads the Gemara to ask, Why then does our Mishnah Dafka talk only about a case of a sick shaliach? It seems from this brisa that it doesn't matter. You either hold that it's okay or you hold that it's not okay. So the Gemara answers, I'll give you 3 ways of reinterpreting the brisa to make it fit within our Mishnah. Either the Tanakama, when he says that it's okay to appoint a second shaliach when the guy says take the get, is only telling you that it's okay if the shaliach gets sick. That's one way of looking at it. Or the Tanakama, who says that when he says you take, that you're not allowed to appoint the shaliach, that's only when the shaliach is not sick. But if the shaliach is sick, that's an exception. And Rabbi Shimon Gamliel he v'chol hashayni. Alternatively, you could even say that our Mishnah goes like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, who says you always are not allowed to appoint a second shaliach. However, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel would agree that if the shaliach gets sick, then he would permit it, like our Mishnah says. So, in other words, the whole exercise is just to be able to reconcile the brisa with the Mishnah, which says that the only time a shaliach can appoint a second shaliach is if the first shaliach gets sick, but otherwise not. Now, let's look at our Mishnah again. Tanan, Hamevi get be'eretz Yisrael b'chala, Raizel mishalchu b'yaracher. So the shaliach who gets sick can send it to via another second shaliach. Or minhu, let's raise a contradiction. Amar l'shnayim tenu get le'ishti, o l'shlosha kisvu get utenu le'ishti, harei elu yichtavu v'yitnu. So there's a brisa that says as follows, and we have to sort of be medayik very carefully, as Rashi does in the Mishnah, in the brisa. A man goes to 2 guys and he says, give a get to my wife. Now he doesn't say write a get for my wife. Normally when a person says give a get to my wife, he has a piece of paper in his hand and he's giving it to the shaliach. In this situation, he turns to 2 guys and he says, you guys give a get to my wife. Now, in this situation, what's implicit is that he's asking them to take care of the writing of the get for him. And in that situation, he's implicitly telling them, I want you guys to be the witnesses, and I want you guys to write the get as well. So then the halacha is that they are not allowed to ask someone else to take care of it for them. They have to do it themselves. And secondarily, the brisa says that if he turns to 3 guys and he says, I want you to write a get for my wife and give it to my wife, so then there too, they have to take care of it themselves. Now, if he would just say, give a get to my wife to 3 people, then that would not indicate that they are not allowed to have someone else do it. Because when there are 3 people, they can comprise a beis din. So if I go over to a beis din and I say, give a get to my wife, I'm authorizing the beis din to assemble the edim and to assemble the sofer. But because I told them explicitly, write it and give it, it's implicit that I'm telling them, I only want you guys to do it, I don't want anyone else to do it. And the Gemara's question is that it seems from this brisa that if you give instructions to people to give a get to my wife, you don't have the option as the shaliach of the husband to give it over to somebody else to do. Why then does our Mishnah say that if the shaliach got sick, he could give it over to someone else to do? That's the Gemara's question. Inhu in, avol shaliach lo. You see that they don't have a right in this brisa, regardless of whether the first 2 guys get sick or not, to give it over to somebody else. Amar Abaye, hasam taimamai mishum bizayon de baal, hacha baal lo kapid. So here's Abaye's answer. He says, you're not understanding the reason why the brisa over there says that the 2 guys who get the instruction to give a get to his wife are not allowed to pass it on to anyone else. It's because we don't want to embarrass the husband. See, normally, if the protocol is that I, as the husband, have to take care of writing a get for my wife, and only then can I send it via proxy. If I go over to 2 of my friends and I say, guys, I'm a mess, I got nothing to my name, my wife wiped out the bank account, I got nothing, I'm emotionally, psychologically a wreck, do me a favor, just take care of the get for my wife. So he's essentially saying he's helpless. He doesn't even have the fortitude to even write the get that a husband is normally supposed to do for his wife, either to write it himself or to hire a sofer to do it. He's totally out to lunch. So that's an embarrassment. If these 2 guys were to go ahead and hire somebody else to do it, they would be spreading an embarrassment for the husband. And that's the reason why the Brisa says they have to do it themselves, because it's a bizayon, it's an embarrassment to the husband. And it's the same thing with the three guys when he gives them that instruction, guys, you write it and you take care of it, because again, he's a mess. However, in our situation, the husband is coming to the shaliach, he's all put together, he's fine, he's happy, he's taking care of the get, he's written it up, and he gives it to the shaliach. There's no bizayon there. And that's why the Mishnah says it's perfectly fine if the shaliach needs to, he can always assign another shaliach. There's no bizayon to the husband. That's the difference. Rava Amar Mishum Demili Ninhu Umilu Lo Mimsaran L'Shaliach. Rava says that's not the explanation. The real explanation is the reason why when you go over to two guys and say, write a get for my wife, and you don't give them anything, it's because you've only given them words. And words cannot be transferred by proxy. In other words, if I ask you to do something for me and I give you something to deliver, then you can transfer that delivery responsibility to someone else because you're transferring a physical object. But if I'm just giving you verbal instructions to do something, then you can't appoint someone else to do it on your behalf.
How are you shliach for davening? Let's say,
we have a principle called Shomea Ka'ona. Shomea Ka'ona is a totally different ball game, right? So, but when it comes to shlichus of performing a certain mitzvah or performing a certain protocol, a kinyan and so forth, it can only be done if there's something physical that's transferred from the mishaleach to the shaliach. Then the shaliach can take that same physical transfer and transfer from the first shaliach to the second shaliach. But if there's only verbal instructions, it's non-transferable.
This verbally tells him to deliver it, or verbally tells him to write it. What's the difference? I don't get it.
Because he's not giving them anything. He's just giving them.
Shliach, isn't he?
But he's not giving them anything. Normally, when you make someone a shaliach, you give a woman you give the shliach the get. You give them a piece of paper that's the get. Mm-hmm. That's the physical object. That the shaliach can transfer to someone else to do. But if I'm just verbally telling you, take care of the get for my wife and deliver it to her, that's non-transferable. There's nothing tangible there. That's Rava's argument. So now the Gemara's question is, my beinai, is there a halachic nafkamina between Abaye's explanation as far as bizayon of the husband and Rava's explanation is that it's purely verbal and therefore it's non-transferable. So ika beinai hu shliach matana uveplugta de Rav Shmuel. He says, yes, there is a very important ramification, and that is when we're not dealing with the laws of GITTEN, but we're dealing with the laws of matana. Let's say I want to give my friend, I want to give him a gift of $1,000, and I tell the shaliach, go ahead and get the shtar that shows the transfer of the gift from myself to my friend for $1,000. In that situation, according to Abaye, there's no bizayon over there. There's only a bizayon if I'm normally the one who's supposed to write the contract and I am negligent and I can't take care of it. But when the protocol is that when I want to give you a gift, it's your responsibility as the recipient to write up the shtar. I don't have that achrayus, and therefore there's nothing wrong for me to give an instruction to a shaliach, do me a favor, I want you to give this gift, but have him write up the shtar before you give him the $1,000. There's nothing wrong with that, and therefore, according to Abaya, that one shaliach can go to a second shaliach and take care of it also. But according to Rava, if it's purely a verbal instruction and I'm not giving him any paper, then that first shaliach cannot appoint a second shaliach, and that's the same machlokes as Rav and Shmuel. That Rav Omer Matana Ina Kiget, Ushmuel Omer Matana Harehi Kiget, where Rav says that just like when you give an instruction to these two guys, right, and it's purely verbal, it's non-transferable, right, and therefore Shmuel says that it's just like a matana is the same thing, that if you just give someone a verbal instruction of giving a matana to someone and just asking them to retrieve the shtar matana, that shlichus cannot be transferred to a second shaliach, and Rav says that no, it could be, because again, like I said, it's the same machlokas as Abaye and Rava. Now, now then our Mishnah told us that it depends. If the husband said to the shaliach, when you give my wife a get, take back my autographed baseball, right? In that situation, the halacha is that the shaliach cannot appoint a secondary shaliach. Why? because essentially what the husband is saying is that I only want you to bring back the baseball to me. I don't want anyone else to take care of it. That's implicit. And therefore the shaliach cannot appoint a secondary shaliach in that case. So the Gemara now says, Omer Reish Lakish, Kan Shana Rebbe, Ein Hashol Rashai Lahashil, Ve'ein Hasocher Rashai Lahaskir. So Reish Lakish says, based on this Mishnah, the halacha is, that can be inferred from here, is that if I borrow something from you, I cannot in turn lend it to somebody else. And if I rent something from you, I cannot in turn lease it out to somebody else. Why? Because if the husband is telling the shaliach, pick up the baseball, then it's implicit that I'm not giving you the rights to give it to somebody else to bring it back. You're the shoel, you're like sort of borrowing the baseball as the shaliach, and therefore I expect you to bring it back yourself. Don't give it to somebody else to give it back to me. Okay? Just in the similar vein. It's like, when this ever happened to you, you lend someone a book, and you say, I'd like my book back, please, and they say, I gave it to somebody else to read. Chutzpah. Right? You know that the halach is here, right? The halach is here. You're not allowed to do that. You got to ask Rishus first. So Amrlo Rabbi Yochanan zu afilu tinoko shel beis rabin yodim osa. So Rabbi Yochanan says, you don't need our Mishnah to teach me that halacha. This is a halacha that even children in elementary school already know. That if you borrow something, you can't lend it to somebody else. That's not the import of our Mishnah. But rather, elazinin de gita nami lo havi, denasa kemisha amerlo, al tegarshena ela babayis v'girsha ba'aliyah, al tegarsha ela biyamin v'girsha bismol. Rabbi Yochanan says there's a chisaron in the delivery of the get itself. And we're going to clarify what Rabbi Yochanan is saying. He's saying there are certain circumstances where, depending upon how the husband gave the instructions, it's possible that if the shaliach does not fulfill the instructions carefully, in the case of the autographed baseball, then it could be that the get is not valid, the get is null and void. So, for example, if the husband gave very explicit instructions and the shaliach does not fulfill those instructions, it's no different from if the husband says, when you deliver the divorce paper to my wife, I want her to be in the ground floor of the house. I don't want her to be upstairs. And instead you give her the get upstairs, the halacha is that nullifies the get. Or if, let's say, you say to the shaliach, when you deliver the get, make sure you put it in her right hand, not her left hand. It's a tanai. Exactly. It's a tanai in the get. So Rabbi Yochanan says, that's what our Mishnah is trying to tell us, that because the shaliach is told explicitly, bring back the baseball, if he doesn't fulfill it properly by taking back the baseball when he gives her the get's not a valid get. Now, what does this have to do with the secondary shaliach? So now we're going to explain. Dekulei al mahecha denafka le'apei v'yahavalei chayfetz v'hadar shaklamine gita kulei al malopligi de gita ma'al yahavi. Everyone agrees, Rabbi Yochanan is not contesting the issue, that if the husband says, listen, when you give my wife the get, first take back the baseball and then give her the get. So in a situation where the wife comes out to receive the get, and she brings out the autographed baseball and puts it in the shaliach's hands, and then the shaliach gives her the get, then everyone agrees that that's a fulfillment of the Tanai. Ki pligi hecha de amar le shkol mina chayfetz v'hadar hav lagita v'azal ihu v'yoiv lagita v'hadar shakol mina chayfetz. The machlokus between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish is as follows. What happens if the husband says explicitly to the shaliach, listen, shaliach, when you go to deliver that get, make sure she gives you the baseball first, and then give her the get. Okay? Because I want that baseball. I'm not prepared to give her that divorce without the baseball. Right? When the shaliach gets there, he forgets, he gets a little famished, and he gives her the get first, and then she gives him the baseball. So that's the machlokas between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. That according to Rabbi Yochanan, posel v'kol shekein bishlucho, Reish Lakish machshir bishlucho v'kol shekein bo. Rabbi Yochanan says it was a very pedantic and specific tanai, and therefore, if you reverse the order, the get is null and void, even if he ended up getting the baseball back. And Reish Lakish says, come on, be real. The husband doesn't care what the order is. He just wants to make sure that she's not going to con the shaliach and not deliver the baseball because she now has the get. But if she actually gave the get, it doesn't matter the order as long as the shaliach got the get. And this is how it's relevant to appointing a secondary shaliach. According to Rabbi Yochanan, the reason why the Mishnah tells us not to appoint a secondary shaliach when the husband says, bring me back the baseball, is because the shaliach may have been given very explicit instructions. First get the baseball, then give her the get. And out of a concern that if the shaliach appoints a second shaliach, he may not tell him that detail. He may just tell him generically, swap the baseball for the get. And he doesn't tell him all of the instructions. That's why the Mishnah says that you cannot appoint a second shaliach in that case. It's got nothing to do with the shoyel sending it off to a second. If you're borrowing something, don't lend it out again. That's not the issue. The issue over here is that you could potentially nullify the get completely by having a second shaliach do it without knowing the full instruction of the husband. And Reish Lakish's argument is, the husband doesn't care what the order is. All he cares about is getting his baseball back. So it's perfectly fine. If that was the only concern, it would be perfectly fine to appoint the second shaliach. And therefore, the real concern of our Mishnah is the get will be valid no matter what. The issue is an issue of choshen mishpat. It's an issue of geneva. It's an issue of, if the husband wants you to bring back the baseball, don't give it to someone else to bring it back. But b'di'eved, if he does, according to Reish Lakish, the get is still valid. Okay, let us go weiter. Mishnah. Hamevi get b'medinas hayam v'chala osa shliach beveistin u'mishalcho v'armer lefneim b'fanai nichtav u'b'fanai nechtam. So now let's talk about the flip case. The previous Mishnah talked about a scenario where you're giving the get in Eretz Yisrael, and therefore there's no problem to appoint a second shaliach because no one has to say b'fanai nichtav u'b'fanai nechtam. But what if you're coming from outside Eretz Yisrael, delivering a get in Eretz Yisrael? We know the shaliach has to say b'fanai nichtav b'fanai nechtam. What happens if he gets sick and he needs to appoint a second shaliach? That second shaliach cannot say those words because he wasn't present when the get was written. So what's the solution? So the answer is like this. The first shaliach has to go and organize a beis din. He gets sick, he's got the flu, and he says, I can't go any further. So we said, okay, no problem, Reb Yid, you're in a city now where we'll set it up for you. We'll set up a beis din. We gather a tribunal. He says to the tribunal, b'fanai nichtav b'fanai nechtam. The beis din now takes possession of the get, and that's perfectly fine. He's fulfilled his shlichus, and now its beis din is empowered now to deliver the get to the wife. Okay? What do they do in turn? Ve'ein shliach acharon sarch sheyomer b'fanai nechtam el omer shliach beis din ani. So when they appoint their shaliach, obviously that shaliach does not say b'fanai nichtav b'fanai nechtam. He can't say that. So instead he just says, I'm a shliach beis din. And that's sufficient, and that fulfills the rabbinic edict of the shaliach saying b'fanai nichtav b'fanai nechtam, as long as he says I'm the shliach beis din, carrying on from where the beis din authorized me, that's fine. So the Gemara now says, Amr le rabbanan la'avimi b'rei de rabavo. So one day, the rabbis said to Avimi, who was Rabbi Avohu's son, and they said to him, Be'imine me Rabbi Avohu, please ask your father the following shaila. Shliach de shliach mashvi shliach olo. We know that a shaliach can appoint a second shaliach. Can a second shaliach appoint a third shaliach? So Amr lehu haloti boy lechu midikatani ein shliach ha'acharon mechlal demashvi shaliach. He says, what's the question? I don't even have to ask my father that question. Just look at the Mishnah. He says, the Mishnah says, when it describes the shaliach of the beis din, it doesn't call him the shaliach sheni. What does it call him? No, it calls him the shaliach ha'acharon. Right? It doesn't say he's the second shaliach. It calls him the last shaliach. So what does that tell you?
That's it.
No, it means that there doesn't have to only be two. There could be 20 shalichim. Because why call him the last? Call him the second. The fact that you're calling him the last means that the second could have appointed a third, and the third could have appointed a fourth, etc., until you get to the last guy. So that shows you that a second shaliach could appoint the third shaliach. Ela kitiboy lechu ki mashvi shaliach beveis din o afilu shalo beveis din. Here's the question, said Rabbi said Avimi, that you should be asking my father. The question is, when a second shaliach who was appointed by Beis Din appoints the third shaliach, does he have to appoint him in another Beis Din, or is he coming from the koach of the Beis Din, and therefore he can give it to him even outside the Beis Din? So Amrulei halo mi bayalan midikatani ela omer shliach Beis Din ani. So they said back to him, that Shiloh we don't have. In other words, because we also look at the Mishnah. The Mishnah says that last Shaliach has to say, I am a Shaliach Beis Din. For him to be able to say that I'm a Shaliach Beis Din, he must have been deputized in a Beis Din. So therefore that proves that if a second makes the third has to be deputized in a Beis Din. He cannot just be deputized by the second Shaliach. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Masni Achi. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says that wasn't the interaction between the rabbis and Avimi. Actually, the dialogue was just the opposite. That Amr le Rabbanon le Avimi berei de Rabbi Avahu be'imine me Rabbi Avahu shliach de shliach ki mash v'shliach beveistin o shelo beveistin. So that they really went to him and said, when the second shaliach appoints a third shaliach, does that third shaliach have to be deputized in Beis Din or not, or can he just be appointed outside of Beis Din by the second shaliach? So Amr lehu v'tiboy lehu imashvi shaliach ba'alma. So Avimi said you should have a more basic question: can a second shaliach appoint a third shaliach in the first place? So Amr lei halo komi bayulan ditnan ena shaliach ha'acharon michlal de shaliach mashvi shaliach. They said to him, no, that's not our shaila. We don't have that as a shaila. It's clear from the language of the Mishnah because it says shliach ha'acharon, the last shaliach, which implies it doesn't just stop at a second shaliach. It could be a third, fourth, or fifth. So elaki komi ba'ilan beveistin or shelo beveistin. Our only question is that when that third shaliach is appointed, does it have to be in Beis Din or not? So Amar lahu hanami lo tiboy lechu de katani ela omer shliach Beis Din ani. So Avimi's response to them, well, if that's the case, then it's clear to you that there could be a third shaliach, then you shouldn't have a shaila, because that third shaliach has to be able to say, I'm a shliach Beis Din, and therefore the only way he could say that if he's deputized in Beis Din. So that answers your question. Amar Rabba, shliach be'eretz Yisrael osa kama shluchim. Rabba says that if you're a shliach on a get in Eretz Yisrael, you could potentially appoint multiple shluchim. The first could give it to the second, who could give it to the third, right? And of course, as our Mishnah said, they all have to be sick in order to get a heter to do it, but it could potentially be done. You could have 100 shlichim if you needed. So Amar Ravashi imeis rishon bat lukul, and Ravashi comes along and says an interesting caveat. He says that's provided that the first shaliach who was given the get in the first place is still alive. But if he dies before the last shaliach gives it to the wife, then the whole thing is off. So Amar Marba Ravashi ha da'aba de katnusa hi. He says, Marba Ravashi says, my father, when he said that, he must have been a young and inexperienced yeshiva bacher, because that clearly is not the halacha. There's no rhyme or reason why, if the first shaliach passes, that the shlichus should be batal. He says, ilu meis bal, midi mishasha isbahu, kulu mikoch man ka'asu mikoch dabal ka'asu, isa labal isnu lakulu, les labal lesnu lakulu. He says the whole get is coming from the force of the husband. So if the husband is alive, then the shlichus works regardless of which shlichim died in the interim. Right? As long as the husband is still alive and the shlich holding the get is alive, then the process is alive. But if the husband dies before it gets into the hands of the woman, that's when the get is off. But it's got nothing to do with the first shaliach. Now, hahu gavr d'shada lagita lidvisu, amar shliach lo yadanala. So there was once a man who wanted to give a get to his wife, and he gives it to the shliach, and the shliach says, I'm happy to take it to Minsk where I'm traveling, or Tel Aviv where I'm going, whatever he says. There's only one problem. I have no idea where to find your wife. I don't know what she looks like. How am I going to find her? So Amar le zil yohavei la'aba bar minyumi di'ihu yadala v'leizel v'lisve nihala. He says, no problem. When you get to Tel Aviv, give the get to Abba bar minyumi. He knows my wife. He knows what she looks like. He'll take it and he'll give it to my wife. Okay? Asa v'lo ashkach la'aba bar minyume. So the guy, the shliach, gets there. He can't find Abba bar minyumi. He doesn't know where he is. So ashkach le Rabbi Avo v'Rabbi Chanina bar Papa v'Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha v'Yosef Rav Safra Gabayu. So he gets to Tel Aviv or wherever it is, and actually it's not Tel Aviv, it's somewhere in Bavel, right? Because he's somewhere in Bavel, and he finds these three sages. It's either Pumpadisa or Machuza or Surah, wherever it was, and he finds these three sages, and they're sitting and learning in front of Rav Safra. And he tells them his predicament, I got to give this to Abba Bar Menyumani, I can't find him. So Amrulei, Mesor Milach Kamei Didan, D'chiyese Abba Bar Menyumi, Nisvine Lei, B'leizel V'lisvine Law. They said, no problem. Look, there's three of us. We're a duly constituted Beis Din. You give it over to Beis Din, and therefore you fulfilled your responsibility. You'll say, B'fanai nechtam, B'fanai nechtam. And then, when Abba Bar Menyumi comes back to the Beis Medrash, we're not sure where he is, but when he comes back, we'll give it to him, and he'll give it to the guy's wife. So Amar Lahu Rav Safra v'hashliach shelo nitan legeirushinhu. Rav Safra says, wait a minute, Rabbi Say, that's not legal. He says, the only time when a shaliach is, and this is what we started the shir with this morning, the only time that a shaliach is authorized to appoint a second shaliach is if he's coming with the authority of the husband to divorce the woman. But this fellow, remember, what were the instructions the husband gave to the shaliach? Once the shaliach told him, I don't know your wife, how am I going to find her? The husband said, all right, listen, don't deliver the get to my wife. Give it to Abba Bar Menyumi. I'm no longer a shaliach on the get to divorce the wife. I'm just here to deliver a piece of paper to Abba Bar Menyumi. I have no right to transfer the shlichus to somebody else, because the only time that we allow a shliach, the way Rashi goes, the only time that we allow a shliach to appoint another shliach is if he's a shliach to divorce. If he's a shaliach to deliver, then you don't have a right to just to give it to someone else indiscriminately.
Including a Beis Din.
Including a Beis Din. Including a Beis Din. So Rav Safra says, you have no right to tell him to do that, because he cannot relinquish it until he finds Abba Bar Menyumi. So ichsofu. So the truth is, these three rabbis were embarrassed because they realized that Rav Safra was correct. So Omar Rava kafchinu Rav Safra litlasa rabbanan smuchi. So Rava commented, ironically, that Rav Safra the Great was able to undermine these three great ordained rabbis. Amar Ravashi, v'mai kavchinu, mika amar le Abba Bar Menyumi v'lo at. So Ravashi says, I disagree. I don't happen to agree with Rav Safra's objection. Because when the husband gave the get to the shaliach, he wasn't telling him, only give it to Abba Bar Menyumi. Originally, remember, what did the husband tell the shliach? I'd like you to give this divorce paper to my wife. It's only when the shliach said to him, I don't know what your wife looks like, he says, okay, listen, if you can't find my wife, give it to Abba Bar Menyumi. He wasn't telling him that you cannot deliver it to my wife. If you figure out who my wife is, like, someone tells you, oh, that's Mrs. So-and-so, then of course you can give it to her. So therefore he is a shliach on a get, and therefore he is allowed to be able to deliver it to Beis Din and say, b'fanai nichtav, b'fanai nechtam, and fulfill a shlichus that way. It's perfectly fine. So that's, Rav Ashi's opinion is, that what these three rabbis were suggesting was perfectly legit. So Ika da Amri, others learn that the story happened this way. Amar Rava kavchinu Rav Safra l'tlasa rabbanan smuchi b'ta'usa. That Rava said that Rav Safra's argument, where he thought he undermined the three rabbis, was actually an erroneous argument, just like Rav Ashi had said. Amar Rav Ashi, but in this version Rav Ashi says no. Mai ta'usa, mai ka'amar le Abba Bar Menyumi v'lo at. That really Rav Ashi says just the opposite. No, Rav Safra's argument was correct. Because once the husband saw that this shmendrik of a shaliach doesn't even know how to find his wife, he said, all right, listen, I don't trust you anymore. You better just give the get to Abba Bar Menyumi. He'll find my wife. You don't get involved. And that's what the guy's instructions were. And once he made that instruction that don't give it to my wife, just give it to Abba Bar Menyumi, that's what he meant implicitly. The fellow is no longer a shliach on the get, and he can no longer dispense his responsibility by just giving it over to Beis Din.
May I just ask a question?
Yeah.
I'm surprised that the Beis Din was excluded because of a shlichus issue, because I thought they were facilitating the request of the original husband, and then we'll give it to Abba Bar Menyumi.
They're offering to facilitate it, but the husband's instructions.
They're fulfilling his instructions.
But the husband's, yes, but if a person, if the Beis Din never met the husband, they haven't been authorized to fulfill that shlichus. And so if a man says, you act as my delivery boy, take something from point A to point B, he has to fulfill that shlichus. The only time where we say that he can pass it off to someone else or give it to Beis Din is if it's a shlichus on a get. But this guy is not, there's an accommodation for shlichus on a get, for aguna or for whatever reason, that the Chachamim said, okay, you can point the secondary shliach. But here he's not a shliach on a get, right? And therefore that accommodation, in other words, the only accommodation is when he's a shliach to give the wife a get. Then we say he can give it to Beis Din, he can give it to a second shliach, etc.
Oh,
okay? So, Hahu Gabra Deshada Lagita Lidvisu. There was a man who was giving a get to his wife. Amar le l'shliach lo teisvei nihala atlasin yomim. And he said to the shliach, listen, I know it's only a 3-day journey to get to where my wife lives, but wait 30 days before you give it to her. I don't want her to get it for 30 days. For whatever reason, he didn't want his wife to get it for 30 days. So you may have to stick around for a few weeks. You got a birthday coming up. Yeah, I want to give it to her on her birthday, right? So you don't want to. You'll get a hotel room in that town, and you'll stay there for 3 weeks, and then you can give it to her. So itnis begav tlasin yomin, and asalakami derava. So the shaliach has every good intention, but when he gets to town, he gets a telegram that says he's got to come home. He's not going to make it the whole 30 days. He says, listen to Rava, I can't stay here for 30 days to deliver the get. What should I do? So Amar Rava, chala taimamai mishum da'anas hainami anasu. So Rava said, this would be analogous to the case of our Mishnah, where if a guy gets sick, he has a mishap, he can't fulfill the shlichus, he can pass it on to a second guy. This would be the same thing over here, and I give you a heter to pass it on to someone else. But because this is in chutz la'aretz, you have to bring it to a Beis Din and say b'fanai nichtav v'fanai nechtam. So Amar lei mesor milach kamei didan de labasar tlasin yomin mashvinan shliach b'yohiv leini Allah. So here's what you should do, says Rava. I'll put together a Beis Din, give us the get, say b'fanai nichtav v'fanai nechtam, and then after 30 days we'll appoint a shaliach and give it to the missus. So Amar lei rabbanan l'Rava v'hashaliach shalonitin l'gerishinu. So the Chachamim said to Rava, but this fellow is not a shliach on the get until the 30 days comes to fruition. So again, it's the same argument that Rav Safra made before. He's not a shliach on the get, so that this accommodation of him allowing to deliver it to Beis Din should not apply to him. So Amar lahu kevin de labasar tlasin yomin matzi megaresh k'shliach shenitin legerishinu. So Rava said no. Since he's appointed to deliver it in 30 days, just the fact that 30 days has not arrived does not make him not a shliach for a get. He's still called a shliach on a get. So v'leichu shema payis. But now the Gemara asks a totally different question. The question now is, what about the fact that the husband may reconcile with the wife? Remember, we learned about this concept of a get yashan, right? Under normal circumstances, if I'm in China and I give a shliach a get, so you don't have to worry that the husband is going to reconcile with the wife, even if it takes 2 months to get to the wife in North America, right? Because the shaliach went ahead of the guy. There's no way that this guy's going to surpass the shaliach and meet up with his wife. You don't have to worry about that. But in this situation, he gives the shaliach a get. It takes 3 days to get to the wife in Eretz Yisrael, and he says, wait 30 days. Shouldn't you worry that maybe the husband is also in the same town now, and he's going to try and reconcile with the wife? And we know the halacha is if the husband is intimate with the wife before the get is delivered, the get is invalid, right? So milo tanan me'achshav im lo basi mikan v'ad yud beis chodesh umeis b'soch yud beis chodesh harei get. Let's look at the Mishnah. We're going to see a Mishnah later on that if a man gives his wife a get and he says this is only a get to be active now if I leave and don't come back in 12 months. This was very common for men who went out to war to give to their wives. If I don't return in 12 months, the get is active now. Okay? So, v'havinan b'avinechu shema payes. And the question is, but why should the get be valid? Why shouldn't you worry about a get yasham, that maybe the husband reconciled with the wife in the interim, so that even retroactively it should invalidate the get? So, v'amar rabba baravhuna hachi amar rava mari Amar Abamori Mishmei Derav, Ba'omer Ne'emenes Alai Lomer Shalobasi. That you're right. In that situation where the husband says that the get should only be active 12 months retroactively, you have to make sure that the husband also declares at the same time when he gives her the get, he says in front of witnesses, if I ever try to invalidate the get by claiming that I reconciled with my wife in the interim, my wife has the power of two Eidim to say that that's not true. And as long as my wife testifies that we never reconciled, that we were never intimate in all those 12 months, then I have no right. I hereby declare that any future protestation that I make is null and void. But you don't have that over here. You don't have the husband having the opportunity to say that I hereby nullify any future protestation to claim that it's a get yashan and that we reconciled. So the Gemara says, ichsif. So Rava says, oh, I'm so embarrassed. I never thought of that. And therefore he said, that's true. There's another concern here, which is that even if we let the shaliach deliver the get, but we have to be choshesh for a get yashan that the husband in the interim, before the 30 days are up, will reconcile with his wife. But l'sofi gloi milsa da arusa havoy. Amar Rava im amru bin asua yomru ba arusa. But then Rava discovered, now wait a minute, this divorce between the husband and the wife is not a case of nisun where they were living together. This was a case where there was just erusin. And the fiance was just basically breaking off the erusin. They had never lived together as husband and wife. And Rava said, the whole concern of get yashan that they're going to reconcile is only when they were living as husband and wife. But in this situation, there is no such concern, and therefore I am vindicated. I was right to let the guy deliver the shtar to Beis Din. So Havad Amar Rava Havade ki komi bayalon ki mashbu Beis Din shlich b'fanav or shalo b'fanav. But Rava said, but here's the question that I do have. I know that I can take the get from this guy, and since he has to leave before 30 days, we'll appoint a shaliach instead of him to wait the 30 days. The shaila is, do I have to appoint the secondary shaliach in the presence of the first shaliach, or can I send the first shaliach away, and then we as Beis Din will take care of the second shaliach independently? Hadar pashta bein b'fanav bein shalo b'fanav, and Rava then said, you know what? If the Beis Din's doing it, then it doesn't have to be in the presence of the first shaliach. It's fine for us to do it ourselves. And shalchu mitam bein b'fanav bein shal b'fanav, and they sent the message that way from Eretz Yisrael as well, that you can even appoint the second shaliach, the Beis Din can appoint the second shaliach, even in the absence of the first shaliach. I'm going to hold it here for today. Have a wonderful day, and a guten chodesh.